Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. These words from Carl Jung often strike us in the moments we least expect, those times when the surface of our lives appears calm, yet an undercurrent of restlessness tugs from below. Society frequently tells us that the pinnacle of our career is a grand triumph, an arrival point where our years of effort finally pay off in prestige, comfort, and respect. We imagine ourselves standing atop the proverbial mountain, looking down at the path we've climbed, feeling certain that all the uncertainties and struggles are behind us. But what if that mountain peak also casts its sharpest shadow? Could it be that, at the very moment we achieve what we've spent decades striving for, an internal reckoning begins? Why do so many of us feel an unspoken turmoil despite having made it? Is it possible that our greatest professional victories illuminate our hidden fears, unacknowledged desires, and unintegrated aspects of ourselves? These questions, both unsettling and liberating, invite us to turn inward at the very hour we thought we'd be turning outward to accept our acclaim. We live in a culture that idolizes success, especially visible material success. From an early age, we're taught that education leads to a good job leads to financial stability, and ultimately, financial stability opens the door to fulfillment. We measure our progress in increments of promotions and pay raises, convinced that reaching a certain echelon in our chosen field will also automatically elevate our personal happiness. But in many cases, this single-minded pursuit leaves little room for introspection. In our teens and 20s, the goal is to find ourselves, but that quest often becomes secondary to the immediate need to establish a career. By our 30s and 40s, we're supposed to be hitting our stride, climbing the ladder, and reaping the rewards of experience. Society places the greatest value on external achievements at precisely the time when our internal landscape is crying out for understanding, acceptance, and wholeness. Many people at midlife or at the height of their professional accomplishments report a subtle sense of dissonance, a feeling that something is off balance, even when everything appears to be going well. Often this is dismissed or pathologized as a midlife crisis, portrayed in caricatures of impulsive decisions, radical lifestyle changes, or abrupt relationship shifts. But according to Jung, what we label a crisis may, in fact, be a developmental invitation. It's not merely about dissatisfaction with external circumstances. It's the psyche's push toward individuation, that ongoing journey of aligning with our whole self, conscious and unconscious. Jung's work suggests that this deep disquiet can actually be a herald of growth. He believed that in the first half of our lives, we construct a persona, a social mask shaped by familial, cultural, and professional expectations. Simultaneously, we relegate what is deemed unacceptable or unprofitable, our less flattering traits, our vulnerabilities, or desires that don't match the social script, into the shadow. When we reach a certain stage of accomplishment, the tension between these layers intensifies, particularly because outward success leaves less room to ignore what lurks beneath. In a modern cultural context, success can become a fortress, well-decorated, secure, and seemingly invincible. But every fortress has hidden corridors. Neuroscience points to this as well. Advanced imaging studies show that certain brain regions associated with self-reflection and meaning-making become more active in midlife, as if the mind itself is signaling that it's time to evaluate the internal landscape. Meanwhile, modern research in positive psychology suggests that people who achieve a great deal in their external world still wrestle with feelings of emptiness if they haven't aligned their deeper drives with their daily pursuits. What once seemed like harmless compromises, pushing aside passions for the sake of advancement, stifling emotions to maintain professionalism, or adopting values that weren't truly ours, begin to weigh heavily on the psyche. At the heart of Jung's theory lies the process of individuation, a psychological journey that becomes especially pressing in the second half of life. The first half often revolves around establishing an identity, acquiring the skills to thrive, navigating social norms, and forming a persona that can smoothly interface with society. Think of it as building a sturdy ship. But once the ship is seaworthy and we've proven our skill as a captain, a deeper question emerges. Where are we sailing and why? The tension in midlife, or at a career peak, often arises because the goals we once pursued no longer carry the same charge. This is where the shadow, the part of ourselves we've disowned, knocks loudly. If your entire sense of worth was built on being the unstoppable achiever, it can be jarring to realize you also carry self-doubt, regrets, or dreams that never saw daylight. If you prided yourself on absolute rationality, repressed emotions might suddenly erupt through anxiety or an existential sense of hollowness. During this period, some individuals notice they are driven to re-examine their motivations for success. Maybe the accolades and financial stability, while appreciated, aren't feeding the parts of the soul that crave authenticity, creativity, or closeness with others. Jung insisted that this isn't a failure but a passage, a sign that the carefully curated persona can no longer contain the fullness of who we are becoming. Shadow integration requires us to look honestly at the traits, impulses, and fears we've cast aside. For the high-powered executive who thrives on control, it might mean coming face-to-face with vulnerability or the fear of being ordinary. For the renowned artist who is celebrated for originality, it might mean accepting a buried desire for stability and routine. The mountain peak of career success is the perfect vantage point to observe the contradictory aspects within us. The question is whether we can meet these contradictions with courage and curiosity, or will we flee and try to climb higher, hoping the shadow won't follow. Jung considered the shadow neither purely negative nor a demon to be exorcised. Rather, it is a reservoir of the parts of ourselves we have not allowed into our conscious identity. It can be a wellspring of creativity, insight, and emotional richness once integrated. Modern psychology builds on these ideas by suggesting that accepting disowned parts of ourselves is crucial to mental and emotional well-being. Contemporary researchers highlight that the more people integrate repressed emotions and traits, the more resilient they become. Neuroscientific studies using brain scans reveal that individuals who practice techniques like mindfulness, active imagination, a method Jung championed, or therapy that encourages open dialogue with repressed aspects, often show reduced activity in brain regions associated with fear and heightened activity in regions associated with emotional regulation. So, from a purely biological standpoint, facing the shadow can lead to more adaptive brain functioning. At midlife or a career zenith, the stakes for ignoring our internal signals rise. The more we cling to the comforting illusions of our persona, the more the shadow gains momentum. This can manifest as inexplicable burnout, a sudden crisis of confidence, or even uncharacteristic behavior that shocks our colleagues and loved ones. Think of it like a tectonic plate shift beneath an established city. Everything looks fine on the surface until the fault line decides it's time to move. The seismic activity that follows is both destructive and transformative. The question is whether the ground will move, but how we respond when it does. If we see the upheaval as an invitation to rebuild on more stable foundations, we evolve. If we ignore it, the structural cracks continue to deepen. Jung also introduced the concept of the persona, the public face we wear to make our way in the world. It's not inherently wrong. We need a functional persona to succeed in society. The problem arises when we mistake this social facade for our entire identity. For instance, imagine a high-level manager who has always been the fixer. Everyone relies on her in times of crisis because she's efficient, logical, and calm under pressure. Over time, this role might overshadow her emotional needs, creative pursuits, and her own insecurities. Eventually, the unacknowledged longing for rest, connection, or deeper personal fulfillment might bubble up. If she has no space in her carefully constructed life to address these neglected aspects, the tension builds. The more we invest in a rigid persona, the further away we stray from wholeness. Yet ironically, it is often at the height of our professional success, when we should be the most secure, that the persona's cracks become most apparent. After all, success no longer protects us from the gnawing question, is this all there is? Modern research on emotional intelligence and leadership suggests a strong correlation between authenticity and long-term professional success. Leaders who are able to own their vulnerabilities and communicate openly often build more cohesive teams and inspire greater loyalty. Neurobiologically, expressing genuine emotion and acknowledging mistakes can lower stress markers and promote a healthier work environment. These modern findings beautifully align with Jung's insistence that integrating the shadow isn't just a personal pursuit. It ripples outward into our relationships and communities. When we see powerful individuals or high achievers speak candidly about their struggles, be it mental health challenges, setbacks, or a sense of purposelessness despite accolades, we witness the shadow emerging into collective consciousness. Such honesty can serve as a beacon for others going through similar experiences. Of course, acknowledging the shadow is only the first step. The deeper work involves learning to dialogue with it, to sift through its contents, and to embrace what it offers. Jung believed this integration is a spiritual undertaking, not necessarily in a strictly religious sense, but as a quest for inner unity. If we continue our mountain metaphor, it's as though we reach the summit and suddenly realize there's a hidden valley on the other side, teeming with everything we left behind in our climb to the top. The idea isn't to abandon the summit, it's to allow what's in the valley to inform who we become next. Some people fear that exploring the shadow might diminish their achievements or derail their ambition. Jung would argue the opposite. Integrating the shadow often liberates untapped energy and perspective, enhancing our creativity, empathy, and emotional range. Rather than diminishing our drive, it can imbue our work with a renewed sense of purpose. Despite our best efforts, we remain only partly conscious of our own complexities. The unconscious mind is vast, filled with memories, forgotten dreams, inherited archetypes, and dormant capacities. At the height of a career, we have the option to open a dialogue with these hidden dimensions. Techniques like active imagination, where we visualize and converse with elements of our unconscious, can reveal surprising insights. Some practitioners incorporate journaling, meditation, or dream analysis to capture glimpses of what the conscious mind overlooks. Modern psychology offers frameworks like internal family systems, which, although distinct from Jung's system, resonates with the idea that we contain many subpersonalities that deserve acknowledgement. In the realm of neuroscience, studies on mindfulness meditation suggest that consistent practice can thin the boundary between conscious awareness and subconscious material, making it easier to observe and integrate repressed impulses. The irony is that many of us believe we are fully awake to our motivations at the pinnacle of our career. But often, we are on autopilot, carrying out routines that once served us well yet no longer align with who we've become. By midlife, or whenever our professional peak arrives, our capacity for introspection has evolved. The brain's frontal lobes, associated with self-regulation and higher-order thinking, have matured, giving us a prime opportunity to reevaluate the scripts we've inherited. The invitation is to pivot from climbing higher to exploring deeper. In practical terms, This might look like taking a sabbatical to reflect on personal values, engaging a therapist or coach familiar with Jungian concepts, or gradually introducing more authenticity into daily life, such as admitting uncertainty in meetings, expressing previously hidden creative inclinations, or acknowledging emotions that once felt threatening to our professional image. Each step of integration can be both liberating and disorienting, freeing because it allows us to reclaim lost pieces of ourselves, and disorienting because it challenges our established identity. Jung's concept of the shadow is most commonly misunderstood as something purely menacing, but from a psychological depth perspective, the shadow includes positive potential as well. For example, a person who has spent a lifetime being the responsible one may have suppressed spontaneity and playfulness, relegating these to the shadow. Likewise, someone who has emphasized empathy might have stifled assertiveness or competitiveness, which eventually surfaces in distorted ways. Integrating these qualities means not only acknowledging a darker side, but also claiming gifts we left behind in our single-minded pursuit of a professional ideal. Many mid-career professionals find new passion or success by daring to incorporate these hidden attributes, whether that means changing careers, launching a personal project, or adopting leadership styles that were unimaginable before. The shadow also intersects with what Jung called the collective unconscious, the archetypal patterns shared by humanity. The midlife shift can awaken dormant archetypes like the wise elder, the wanderer, or even the rebel within us. These symbols act as psychological blueprints that help us navigate new terrain. While mainstream achievement culture might dismiss such archetypal thinking as archaic, contemporary psychologists recognize the power of symbolism for guiding personal transitions. Neuroscience, for its part, shows that the brain processes metaphors in ways that can deeply influence our emotions and motivations, which validates Jung's emphasis on myths and symbols as a universal language of the psyche. Experts in depth psychology, such as James Hollis and Marion Woodman, have expanded on Jung's insights, offering modern applications for those at a crossroads. For instance, Hollis suggests that personal fulfillment in midlife hinges on moving away from ego-driven goals and towards soul-directed living. Woodman's work on the unconscious and the body underscores how repressed energies can manifest physically, implying that symptoms like chronic fatigue or stress-related illnesses can be an invitation to reconcile with the shadow. In professional contexts, many coaches trained in Jungian or transpersonal approaches use dream analysis or guided imagery to help executives unlock creative solutions and overcome burnout. Studies in organizational psychology corroborate that workplaces which encourage introspection and emotional intelligence see reduced turnover, higher job satisfaction, and even improved innovation. These findings point to the reality that shadow integration isn't just an esoteric pursuit for a select few. It has tangible benefits for individuals and organizations alike. In our increasingly data-driven world, it's tempting to demand hard metrics before investing in the introspective journey. Yet contemporary neuroscience offers more and more evidence that personal reflection, meaning-making, and emotional integration yield cognitive and psychological benefits. We know from functional MRI research that emotional suppression can lead to increased activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, while emotional processing correlates with greater activation in the prefrontal cortex, associated with decision-making and empathy. The synergy between Jung's depth psychology and modern scientific studies is an ever-growing field, bridging the once separate domains of mythic imagination and empirical validation. As you stand on the summit of your professional life, ask yourself, what remains unexpressed within me? Which parts of my identity have I withheld from public or even private view? out of fear that they might jeopardize the successes I've worked so hard to achieve. And more importantly, could welcoming these hidden aspects actually enhance my life rather than diminish it? The shadow isn't our enemy, it is our teacher. Sometimes it is the key to renewed vitality in an otherwise stagnant script. Imagine looking across the valley that lies beyond your mountaintop, filled with new possibilities, uncharted paths, and the echoes of everything you left behind while climbing. This is the call to adventure that Jung describes, an ongoing dance between conscious intention and the gifts of the unconscious. Returning now to the promise of that opening quote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. We can see how the luminous peak of a career can also illuminate those corners of our psyche we once left in the dark. The career summit doesn't mark the end. Rather, it signals the beginning of a more profound relationship with ourselves. We're no longer chasing external validation to the exclusion of our inner voice. We have the chance to harness our well-honed skills and broader perspective to venture inward, integrating the richness we find there into our professional and personal lives. This journey can be hopeful because it invites us to see that our previous efforts weren't in vain. We needed the discipline, the ambition, the external successes to gather the tools for a deeper quest. Now we carry those tools into uncharted territory. By acknowledging our shadow and allowing our persona to evolve, we transform what might have become a plateau of restless dissatisfaction into fertile ground for ongoing growth. The reward, a sense of meaning that transcends the standard trophies of achievement, a more authentic presence in our relationships, and the freeing realization that our worth runs deeper than any outward role. If we can hold this new perspective, we see that the summit is both an ending and a beginning. Yes, we've conquered the mountain of professional success, but the real adventure, becoming whole, lies ahead. The hope is that by facing the fears and desires we've tucked away, we discover a renewed sense of wonder, curiosity, and purpose. This is the treasure hidden in the shadow, the parts of ourselves that, once reclaimed, enrich our lives with a more complete humanity. Embracing that fullness is perhaps the greatest success of all.